Hello, everyone. My name is Harvey Brownstone, and today our special guest is a highly acclaimed Hollywood actress, social activist, and author. We all fell in love with her as high school guidance counselor Liz McIntyre on the hit TV series Room 222. And a few years later, she won our hearts again as Councilwoman Harriet DeLong on another hit TV show In the Heat of the Night, opposite Carol O'Connor. She's had 3 consecutive Golden Globe nominations for Best Actress in a Drama Series, and she won 2 Image Awards for Outstanding Actress in a Motion Picture and Outstanding Actress in a Drama Series. And if that weren't enough, her first novel, Freshwater Road, won numerous awards and catapulted her once again to international fame as a highly acclaimed author. I'm overjoyed to welcome today's guest, Denise Nicholas. Denise, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your wonderful enthusiasm. There isn't a whole lot of that around anymore. Thank you. I love it.
Well, you deserve it.
Thank you.
Denise, your journey into show business was not a straight line. When you were a teenager, it looked like you were going to be a school teacher, but then you studied pre-law at the University of Michigan, but then you switched your major to Latin American politics, Spanish, and English. Then, after working in New York at an advertising firm for a while, you went to Tulane University in New Orleans, where you majored in fine arts. My question is, why were you so hesitant to pursue acting from the start?
I don't think I ever thought it was really possible to have a real career, not just do a couple of jobs. I was looking for a career. And I also always thought of myself as being too smart to be an actor. That's dumb. But I just couldn't see it. And I had exactly the same feeling about writing. How do you make this a career? How do you really do this long term? So I had those kinds of questions. And I'm sure some of that came from my home and from mom and my dad and my stepfather, who were really focused on education. You know, they considered that the hard road. Hollywood was easy.
Well, in the mid-60s, at the height of the civil rights movement, you left university to join the Free Southern Theater in Mississippi, which was a monumentally important part of the Black theater movement and the civil rights movement. You presented plays written by Langston Hughes, James Baldwin, Ossie Davis. You were using theater as a voice for social protest and to promote African-American culture. And you toured the Deep South for 2 years. Denise, you lived through some of the most tumultuous and painfully heartbreaking times in American history. Can you share some of your experiences with us from that time?
Sure. When I left Ann Arbor to go to Mississippi, I first went to Mississippi, to Jackson, which was where the theater was based originally. But Mississippi was so oppressive at that time, we decided to move the theater into New Orleans, which was close enough. And then we would tour back into Mississippi. You know, in many places we had to sleep on the floor because homes were being shot into. We were harassed and chased, and some of our members were arrested. I was arrested on the street, handing out flyers for a performance in Jackson, Mississippi. I mean, it went on and on. So that's why we decided there was so much pressure and we were so nervous. Everybody was just like, you walking around like this all the time. When is the next hit? So we went into New Orleans, which was a little bit better, a little bit freer.
Well, in 1967, you joined another monumentally important theater company, the Negro Ensemble Company in New York, which produced amazing plays at the St. Mark's Playhouse, starring Samuel L. Jackson, Danny Glover, Angela Bassett, Lawrence Fishburne, Felicia Rashad, Richard Roundtree, and of course, you, Denise Nicholas. That must have been such an exciting time in your life.
It was incredible. I left Louisiana to go to New York to start the professional part of my career in September of 1966. And I started doing auditions and taking classes, the things that all, young people do, getting to New York thinking they're going to have a career in show business in the theater. So it was all going pretty well. I was taking my classes and I was riding the subway. I was being Miss New York. And I got a job. My first job was with Vivica Lindfors and her husband, George Tabori. She was doing a play that was going to tour through colleges from New York to the Midwest and back. And it was a thing that he put together for her. He was a writer, a very famous writer then. And it was called Three Boards and a Passion. He wanted to show off her acting skills on stage. So he put this piece together. And then there were two older actors and two younger. So a Black guy who was younger and me, and she, and Harris Yulin was her counterpart, who was, who is a significant actor. So that was a tour. So I did the tour, got back to New York, unemployed, walking the streets, beginning to wonder, is this what I really want to do? And I got another job in, there was a play off Broadway called The In Rock about the Vietnam War. So I got a replacement job in that. It closed on New Year's Eve, 1966, 67. So once again, walked out into the dark night without a job, wandering around. So then I heard about the Negro Ensemble Company and I wanted to audition for that. So, and then I was accepted and went to work, and I stayed there for the first year of that company. And then I got room 222 and moved to Hollywood. So.
Well, from 1969 to 1974, you played beloved guidance counselor Liz McIntyre in one of my favorite TV shows, Room 222, which won an Emmy for Outstanding New Series. How did you get the role, Denise?
Well, in New York, 20th Century Fox and ABC, of course, have major offices in New York. And my agent let me know that I had an audition. So I went to audition for the part, but they were auditioning young women all over the country. I mean, it was a huge talent search for that role. And I think all the more because there hadn't ever been a show like that with Black characters on TV. It was very mixed. It was an integrated high school, and it was going to be, it's challenging. It was challenging for the network, I guess, to take that on at that time. But coming out of the 60s, it was highly appropriate. So I did the audition in New York. I got a call back. And then after the next round, they said, well, we want you to come for a screen test. So they flew me to California. I didn't know what a screen test was. I swear to God, I did not know. And I was on the set, and I had the scenes. I knew how to do that part. I knew how to learn the lines and everything, but I didn't know any of the mechanics of, how you do this. And so my first audition was with Billy D. Williams, and everybody thought he was such a big name at that time that he was going to get the part that Lloyd Haynes got. He didn't get the part. I did get the part. So that was the first audition. I went back to New York, and then they called me. They said they wanted to do one more test called a personality test. So they flew me back out here. And I said, what is this? What exactly is a personality test, please, sir? And Gene Reynolds was, the late Gene Reynolds, who was just a wonderful human being, was conducting this test. And he was with the cameraman. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, we just want to see who you really are personality-wise, because I'm thinking, why are they doing this? I'm thinking, and I didn't realize this until much later, that was about selling the show. Do you have the kind of energy and personality that will help you promote the show on promotion tours? I couldn't think of another reason. So I said, well, what are we going to talk about? So Gene said, tell me how it was in Mississippi. Well, that started it. And I started talking. There was the Klan. It was everything that everybody in the studio was going, oh my God, oh my God. But I somehow, I don't know how I did it, and I couldn't do it today, managed to get humor out of that. And that's what they fell in love with. I have been chased by the Klan all over Mississippi, and now I'm in Hollywood doing an audition for an ABC series. That doesn't track. But that's the way it was.
That is absolutely amazing.
It was.
Well, I have to tell you that I was in high school when that show was on, and I used to torture my guidance counselors by saying, why can't you be more compassionate like Liz McIntyre? You do realize, don't you, that every high school guidance counselor was being compared to you?
I didn't know that, no. I was just, being the little actress who was on the make to make it. That was about it.
Well, were you channeling anyone from your high school in your portrayal of Liz McIntyre?
Not from my high school, but my great aunt was a guidance counselor in the public schools in Detroit. And before I left Detroit to go out to a little town near Ann Arbor to go to high school, she had tested me and double promoted me because I did well on the tests. And she was the role model for Liz McIntyre on Room 222.
Well, Room 222 was a groundbreaking show because it dealt with some heavy subjects like bullying, coming out, racism, women's rights, mental health, the Vietnam War. You even did a show about Watergate. Did you realize at the time, Denise, that you were part of something unprecedented?
I really didn't. I really didn't. I thought, and this is a part of, I don't know why, but I think after I was in the civil rights movement and went on to New York for a bit, I really wanted to believe that the civil rights movement had changed everything, that Room 222 was the most natural forward step out of the 60s that you could imagine. I did not think that it was that it was some revolutionary thing. I thought it was right in step with what was already going on. What I didn't realize then, which I still have trouble realizing to this day, is how resistant to change people really are. So now, that's where we are, as I'm sure you know.
Well, I do, but I see you very much as still part of that change agent that we desperately need.
Yeah.
In 1975, you co-starred in Let's Do It Again with Sidney Poitier, who also directed the film. It was a hugely successful comedy. You played the wonderful Beth Foster.
I love that role.
What was it like to be directed by Sidney Poitier?
I loved it because he, unlike me, he's not volatile. I'm volatile. He's so calm. He never raises his voice. He speaks to you. He respects everyone equally. He is, and he was, and still is, an elegant, sophisticated man who was gorgeous. I mean, we were all like, oh, look at him, look at him. So he's so handsome, and he's tall, and he's gorgeous. So everybody was in love with him, and he's a straight arrow. He's like, so.
Denise, you weren't too bad looking yourself, you know.
Thank you. Thanks.
And you still are pretty hot.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Still pretty hot. Thanks.
I think you are. After making a lot of guest appearances on shows like Marcus Welby, The Paper Chase, Different Strokes, Magnum, and a lot of others, in 1989, you landed the role of Councilwoman Harriet DeLong on In the Heat of the Night. Were you happy to be on another long-running series?
Yes, I was happy. And at the end of it, I was exhausted because we shot in Georgia. So I was flying back and forth from LA to Atlanta every 2 weeks or so. And then somewhere I think it was towards the end of the first season that I was there, or the beginning of the second, I started talking to Carol about trying to write, trying to be, because he was an actor, writer, in addition to being a producer and director. But he was open to it because his two main artistic accomplishments or projections were as actor and writer. Definitely, writing is very important to him.
Well, were you surprised that Carol O'Connor was able to successfully shed his persona as Archie Bunker?
I was shocked.
Me too.
Yes. Because I bought into it like everybody else. I loved it. I thought it was hysterical. But what I learned was that was not who Carol O'Connor was at all. I mean, from the distance between that character and who he really is like, from here to Hawaii, he just was the most generous and kind and supportive of artists, not just me, but many, many young people, younger than I was at the time that I worked with him, who he loved artists and he liked to support. It was like that with him. If he liked you, he would get behind you for sure.
But did you ever have a chance to talk with him over the years about his image as Archie Bunker? I mean, for someone who was not a racist, who was not a bigot, to be known forever as that character, what was the impact on him, do you think?
I think one of the reasons he wanted to do it in the heat of the night was to expand that image of who he was as a human being, because All in the Family was so successful and so powerful and so funny. And there's not a person on earth who ever saw who wouldn't identify him with that character from the heart and from the soul. To find out that that was not who he was delightful, absolutely delightful.
Yeah, it was a real eye opener for the public. And the other thing that's interesting to me was that at the beginning of the series, Harriet DeLong had an adversarial relationship with Chief Gillespie. He
Yes,
even called you the Dragon Lady. But
yes.
eventually, you became romantically involved with him, and you became one of television's most famous interracial couples. Was it always the plan from the beginning that your character would evolve in that way?
I think that Carol had that plan in his head when he hired me. He didn't tell me that, though. I didn't I didn't know that. He just said to me, I did a reading. Actually, I'm trying to remember my audition. I think it was a filmed audition. Yes, because I was here. The series was already ongoing and they were in Georgia. So I had to do my audition here. They sent a tape to him, and then, he called to chit chat. And he said, I can't hire you because you make me look too old. And I said, but Carol, I'm an actor, remember? I know how to do that. So I kind of, he was reticent, but he liked my work and he liked my attitude. So he took me on.
Yeah, the chemistry was amazing. I never would have believed that's where you were going to go in your career, but there was, it's easy to fall in love with you, but it's harder to imagine you falling in love with him. But you did it in such a gradual way. You brought us all with you, and I think you made us love him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he did that. He's constructed the through line of that relationship from the beginning. He knew what he was going. Carol was brilliant, first of all. I did not know any of that on the first season. And then I began to see where he was going to take it, where he was going to go with it. And there was hate mail. There was a lot of, the usual.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then between 1992 and 95, something really important happened in your career. You wrote 6 episodes of In the Heat of the Night. So I got to ask you, what made you decide to venture out into writing screenplays?
I think that my goal, even let's go back to Room 222. I wanted to write even then. And I submitted story ideas to the producers of Room 222, but they didn't accept any. I think there was a lot of resistance at that time. We're talking early 70s to ladies making advances in different areas and becoming hyphenates, and you're getting a little bit too big for your britches. You can act and write. What? So I never was able to sell anything then, but I knew even on Room 222 that I was headed in the direction of writing. I didn't think then that it would be the second act to my creative life, which is how it's turned out. But I knew seriously that I wanted to write. And when I got to In the Heat of the Night, and I felt that it was time for me to get going with it, I went in to see Carol, because I had about 20 pages of Freshwater Road when I went in to see Carol. I hadn't done anything with it. I didn't even know how to do anything with it at that point. So I went in to see him and I said, I think that you need some stories here, because this thing takes place in Mississippi and you haven't even mentioned the civil rights movement. You haven't even mentioned the fight for voting rights in that area. And I think you need to do it. And he said, well, what would you suggest? And I said, I have the perfect story for you. I think you should do a story about the first Black lady who tries to register to vote in Sparta, Mississippi. And I was there as a youngster. How's that strike you? He said, I'll buy it. And I went, huh? And I said, you will? I was like, huh, you really? You will? He said, yes. I said, well, who's going to write it? I said, will you write it? He said, no, you're going to write it. I said, okay. And he mentored me through that process. All 6 scripts he mentored, and he pushed me into that. He pushed me into it. He was so happy that I had decided to write. And I told him I wanted to write a book about the civil rights movement because it was the most outstanding event of my life to that point. And it was very troubling to me that the world at large seemed to sweep that under the rug. The reason I knew that I wanted to write a book about the civil rights movement and at least inspired by my own participation in it, was that because it was not it was being swept under the rug. And I think now that the reasons are because Kennedy was killed, Martin Luther King was killed, and I think by 1970, with the Vietnam War going full bore, people just had enough of everything. They didn't want to hear another word about civil rights. They didn't want to hear anything about it. And it was stunning to me that that was happening, that it had not taken hold the way I thought it deserved to be taken hold, because it meant such a volcanic change in the lives of people. It could have meant if it had been carried all the way through. And here we are again, it's 2021, and we're dealing with voting rights again in this country. It is insane to me. It's insane.
It's incredible.
But that's what got me going.
Well, it's really incredible.
It is.
And I'm so glad that Carol O'Connor encouraged you and pushed you the way he did, because after In the Heat of the Night, you took professional writing at USC and studied with author Janet Fitch for 5 years. And then in 2005, your first novel, Freshwater Road, was published. And it received incredibly positive reviews. Every major newspaper in America, including the Publishers Weekly, said it was not only one of the best books of the year, but one of the most important novels about the civil rights movement. The book won numerous prestigious literary awards. Denise, this is a stunning achievement. Your book is so insightful and powerful and cathartic. I just loved it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
For those who are not familiar with Freshwater Road, it takes place in the summer of 1964, better known as the historic Freedom Summer, when a young Black woman from Detroit who's lived a middle-class life decides to join the civil rights movement by going to Mississippi to help register Blacks to vote. Her father has mixed feelings about it because he fears for his daughter's safety, and she experiences a profound awakening as a member of the Black community and as a daughter and an activist. Denise, the obvious question here, how much of Celeste Tyree is you?
I think the core heart of the character is definitely me, or so deeply inspired by me and by my experiences, and also the experiences of a couple of girlfriends who also were at University of Michigan and also joined the civil rights movement. One of whom has more in common with Celeste on the political side than I do as Denise, because she was truly more of an activist. I was kind of watching it. That's why I ended up in the theater rather than doing voter registration. So as I tell people, I never registered one human being to vote. I did theater in that environment. I think the heart and soul of Celeste Tyree is certainly, it's my passion. And so, yes, I gave her my passion. And, but she does things, I write her doing things that I never, ever even attempted to do. I had the fear, I remembered that very well. I had no problem writing her fear, because I felt it every minute of the time that I was in Mississippi and also in Louisiana. There's a scene in the book where the group who've been going to classes to learn how to register to vote, when they go for the first time to the courthouse to make the attempt, and the sheriff puts a gun to Celeste's head because he knows that she's leading this voter registration class, and threatens to blow her brains out if she doesn't take these people and get the heck out of there. That actually happened to me in Louisiana. And see, there are like maybe 4 or 5 pivotal incidents in the book that come from my experience that I reframed for the book. I was in New Orleans, the Free Southern Theater had moved to New Orleans, as I said earlier, and we were in an apartment in the French Quarter, and a lot of times civil rights workers would come there for rest and relaxation days, because New Orleans was a little bit freer than Mississippi, not a whole lot. People have a mistaken idea of New Orleans. But some of our mates, our friends, went down to across the street to the corner store to buy cigarettes or whatever. The police used to have their shoes shined right across almost from the apartment that we had. And two guys went across to the corner store, but they didn't come back up the stairs to the apartment. So I went downstairs to check on them, and the police were there. As soon as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, a cop put the gun to my head and said, "If you take another step, I'll blow your effing brains out." They had the two civil rights workers who were photographers, actually, from Black Star. They had all of their cameras all broken down on the sidewalk, took all the film out of the cameras, threw them in the back seat of the car, and took them, arrested them. So that's where that scene was born. The idea for that was born in an actual incident.
No wonder you write so authentically. You lived it.
Thank you, I did.
Was your family life growing up as complex as Celeste's family?
Not quite, not quite that complex, but certainly all families have their complexities, and they're always different, a little bit different from one family to another, but personal interfamilial relationships pretty much follow patterns no matter what ethnic group you're in. You could be in Outer Mongolia and have the same kinds of personal relationships within a family structure. There's only so much you can do. It's a family. And, of course, one of the things you learn as you're in writing class is how to complicate things for the main character. So that becomes, that's a part of the craft.
In the book, you describe Celeste's father as a race man. What exactly is a race man?
A race man in our community, in the Black community, which is a term that isn't used very much anymore, but in his generation it was. It's a person who is supremely aware of racism in America and what it has done to Black people. And he was definitely that kind of guy.
I really love the relationship between Celeste and her father because it's complex and it's textured and it's nuanced. On her way home, Celeste meets with her father in Jackson, and he says, "Damn girl, you Black as me." Denise, that's a very, very powerful moment, and it gave me goosebumps. I still have them.
Because I'm, as you can see, I'm not too dark, but when I come out of Mississippi, I'm like sun time, sun. So my dad, and that sort of thing did happen because my father was very, if anything in this book is based almost completely on a real life character, because Celeste is a mix. The Shuck, the father character, is my father. And this book, more than anything, was me expressing the love I had for this man, because he was an incredible, incredible guy. He was very cool.
And does that ever come through? And then there's something else. There's a term you used in the book that I just loved. You called it a racial Geiger counter. When Celeste looks at a photo of her mother's husband's face, she turns on her racial Geiger counter and can't see anything Black in him. That made me laugh because I think it's like when I turn on my gaydar to see if I can detect a gay person who's passing for straight. And you're making a statement in your book about Black people passing as white.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's plenty of them. So even my mom, who looks very mixed, when I was in school in Ann Arbor, she also worked at Rackham School of Public Administration, and she would, sometimes come to the dorm and take me to lunch or make sure I was going to the dentist. She'd drag me to the dentist. No one thought she was Black. Not
Really?
one person. She was Greek. She was Mediterranean of some sort.
And yet inside, we're just all the same, I think.
I think so. I do. I mean, I don't have, I don't hate people. I can hate, I guess I can hate people who do outrageously dreadful things. Yes, I can hate those people. But just on a normal day, I don't hate anybody. I really don't.
How do you feel having lived through what you have to see America go through what it went through over the last 4 years? When I thought we'd gone so far.
It was a stunning experience this last 4.5 years. I knew it when it was coming to pass. I knew it. I lost friends because I said, he is Hitler Jr. This man is insane. He's a madman. I'd been reading about him for years. And I had some white friends who just would not accept it. They wouldn't believe it. I don't know how they feel now because I'm no longer in touch. I knew what was coming. That's the racial Geiger counter. Now, in his case, he had been very open about his racism and his sexism for many years. But if you hadn't bothered to read the New York papers, you might not know that. So, I mean, he is a dreadful person. He wanted to execute the Central Park Five even after they had been exonerated. I mean, what is that? I sat there and watched that George Floyd thing. I watched the whole trial start to finish. I had seen the footage of his murder. I was horrified, but no more horrified for him than I had been for at least 10 others in the previous 6 or 7 years. So it starts to accumulate, and pretty soon your soul can't take anymore. You cannot take anymore. And when you see that the society is turning its back on these horrible, horrible instances and not even confronting the horror of it, it tells you that the society, at least chunks of the society, do not have your interest at heart at all. And I feel nervous about going to certain places now, which I never felt in the years before Trump. Never, not for 1 second in this state of California have I ever been shy about going anywhere. But my expression for him is he let the dogs out. Now who can put them back in? I don't know.
Do you have hope for the future?
I have less hope now than I had 4 or 5 years ago. I'm sorry to say it, but it's the truth.
Why?
Because I think that what he unleashed, which had been kind of tamped down, it's not that it wasn't there. He didn't make it, but he promoted it, and he made it worse than it needed to ever be. That's my argument. So if saner heads are able to push us back into a little more cohesion going forward, then there's hope. But if we are just going to be this all over the place, they had Jewish people having dinner here, and somebody attacked pro-Palestinians, attacked them in the restaurant and start a fight on the streets here in LA. I mean, what? Come on. So everybody seems to be at each other's throats, and that's what he wanted to happen. He wanted us to be this way with each other. He did not want us to be cohesive. He wanted us to be just angry all the time. And oof, it's a horrible, ugly thing.
Well, I hope you can channel those feelings creatively. I want to ask you, I know that in 2008, you were commissioned by Brown University to write a stage play based on the book. Is there any chance the book might be made into a movie? Because I can see it as a movie. As I was reading it, I could see it.
Thank you. Haven't been, it was optioned 2 or 3 different times, but we were not able to get a deal to put it to the screen. So it's there, it's available. Those options have all expired.
Don't give up. Don't not give up, Denise.
Well, I got another book to write, so I can't, I'm working on a second book.
Well, quite apart from writing another novel, don't you think there's an autobiography inside you ready to come out? Those are very important stories you've lived through, and they can't disappear.
That's what my publisher wants me to do. He really prefers me to do a memoir. And I guess I have about 5 ounces of privacy left. And I just said, no, I don't want to reveal myself anymore. I've already done enough of that. And so I was trying to, I have another thing that he also liked, because I started writing a second book right after I finished Freshwater Road. And I was still in Janet Fitch's workshop. And I was afraid to stop. So I just kept going. I started this other book and it was coming along pretty good. And then I just ran out of steam after I did book tour for a year and a half, back and forth running around selling Freshwater Road. I just said, God, I got to take a break. Well, the break just went on and on and on and on. So now I'm back at the computer trying to pick up the pieces of that book, that second book. Because I think it's good. I think it's good.
I bet it will be. You know, Denise, you've always lived at the intersection of art and politics. Are there a lot of like-minded people on the same wavelength as you in the film and TV industry in Hollywood?
I think so. I think you've been able to see it probably more during the Trump administration than maybe at other times, because he awakened so much in so many people, so much anxiety. He created a lot of anxiety. So I think people who before that had not been willing to speak out started speaking out. There's been a lot. I mean, De Niro has just been wiping the floor with Trump for 4 years, and others as well. So, I mean, his anger comes through in everything he says about this man. Yes, there are people like that. And actors and people in this industry are very pro supporting causes. I mean, not always just money, they show up. So I think that sometimes people want to disparage actors and say, well, you should, like somebody on Fox said, shut up and dribble. Well, that's what they say to actors, shut up and act. Well, screw them. I'm a tax-paying citizen of this country. I can speak. I can speak. I have thoughts. I have ideas. I don't like this. I do like that. And it's my right to speak it.
Did you ever consider running for public office?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
No way, no.
Well, I know you've said that you've retired from acting and you're focusing on your writing, but do you think you could ever be convinced to go back on TV or accept a movie role?
I could be convinced. I could be convinced if it was something really interesting to me. So I think one of the other reasons that I started moving in the direction of writing was because I was a Black woman who didn't look Black enough for a lot of the producers in this town. And I had run into about 25 glass ceilings that had to do with those sorts of things, plus getting older, of course. So I think that there was the kind of work that I had prepared myself for in New York with the Negro Ensemble company, with the classes and the study and everything. I was not able to take it up a few notches in terms of complexity of roles. There weren't any roles. They're just not there. It's better. It seems to be better now. And there seem to be more people of color, women, kind of, getting their day on the screen and having real careers. As I said earlier, not a one-shot thing, a career, y'all. More than a job, a career. Thank you.
Well, when your dear friend, Ernest Hardin Jr., who's also my dear friend, was on our show,
yes,
he said that even though there's been some progress, we still have a long way to go before we see true equality in Hollywood casting. You agree with that, Denise?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So can I dare to ask you whether you can give us a little hint about what your next book is about?
Well, yes, I'll give you a hint.
A hint.
A hint. The lead character, I am trying to do something I didn't think I could do it, but I think I can now. The lead character is a young man. And I said, okay, Nicholas, are you going to write a guy? Okay. So men are a different breed and
tell me about
challenging. It's different. In fact, I have help. I'm taking care of my mom, who's 100 years old this coming weekend. So she's
God
upstairs.
bless it. This weekend she turns 100?
God
bless her. Give her a big hug from me.
I will. Mom, I have helpers for mom. So the Sunday helper has a son who's about the same age or has memories of being the same age as the character I'm writing. So he was here yesterday for a little bit and I interviewed him about his life in high school as a football player and all of that. So it was interesting because the character at the time of the story, he's 20, but he's graduated high school. He stays in this little town a little while, but he wants out. and he's going to get out. This is the young man that I take out of that little town, and I take him to Chicago and eventually to Detroit, since I know Detroit and I can write Detroit. I won't tell you the real seed of the story because I don't want to give it away. It's hot. Okay.
Well, you gave us a hint. I wish you the best of luck with it. I got to tell you, Denise, having you on our show has been such a special experience for me. You're so incredibly talented at everything you do. You've touched millions of fans with your acting, your writing. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show.
Thank you. Thanks so much. You're a joy.
Please promise me that you'll come back with every new book, including the autobiography that I'm going to pester you to write.
Okay, you and my publisher. Okay. Okay, I'll tell Doug you said so. Okay, thanks.
Our guest has been the spectacular actress, author, and activist Denise Nicholas. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Remember to subscribe to the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. And be sure to check out more great interviews with Harvey Brownstone on harveybrownstoneInterviews.com.